Greetings, everyone. Today's lecture is optional to watch, so if you haven't listened to all the listening excerpts from yesterday, all the remaining things we had about Beethoven, go ahead and use this time to finish listening to those. Otherwise, let's go ahead and do a brief overview of early Romantic era opera. So here we go. So we are now in the first half of the 19th century. We're talking the 1800 to 1850-ish, in that neighborhood. So Italy is still the center for opera development. Remember, this is where opera was born, and needless to say, they have the most opera houses of anybody. Every year, over 40 operas were written through this time period. And particularly during this time period, there were three Italian composers that stood out. And they are ones that have had their works, at least one of them, performed continuously somewhere in the world since they were written. And these were Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini. And we're going to start with Rossini. So Gioacchino Rossini was arguably the most famous composer living during the 1820s, with his fame even eclipsing that of Beethoven at the time. He was born to a horn and trumpet player and also an operatic singer. And he was trained as a violist, a singer, and a pianist. And when he was 18, he was commissioned to write his first opera. Now remember, commissioned means someone's paying you to do this. He didn't just write it at 18. Someone was like, hey, I'll give you some money if you write me an opera. So he was very successful. In 1816, he wrote his most successful opera, The Barber of Seville. He earned money by participating in these different performances of his operas because copyright wasn't a thing. So you didn't necessarily make money off someone performing your opera, but if you were a performer in it, then you got paid. But he did well financially. In 1822, he married a soprano, and not long after, they left for London and then ultimately settled in France. And while he was there, he rewrote some of his Italian operas to have French librettos. Remember, libretto in an opera is the text of the opera. And he wrote one original French opera, Guillaume Tell, which I probably mispronounced, but you know it as William Tell, because you probably know the William Tell Overture. He retired at age 39 because he had money. He didn't need to work anymore. And he spent the rest of his years writing small music, but also entertaining, eating, exchanging recipes with famous chefs. He really did quite well and had a really comfortable life. And when he died, he was most remembered for music he'd literally written 40 years earlier. His operas, what was unique about them was they really emphasized the singer. It wasn't about the orchestration, it wasn't about the staging, it was about the singer themselves. And so he'd write these really long lines for singers to sing that were very ornate. They were florid, they were, had lots of little notes going up and down all over the place and very embellished. And he would take full advantage of a singer's range, sending them up and down all over the place. This type of singing, where you sing with good tone through a large spectrum of your range, really high and really high and really low, all with good tone, and consistent tone throughout. This is called bel canto, bel canto, excuse me, I shouldn't overdo the T, this is Italian, which means beautiful singing. Effortless beauty throughout the whole range. It should not look like you're working hard to sing. So there's two excerpts I want you to listen to by Mr. Rossini. One of them is the finale of the William Tell Overture. And remember, the overture is the opening part, the entrance, the introduction. I want you to listen to that. You're going to recognize it. It's the horse and gallop song. You're gonna recognize it, promise you. But the other thing I'd like you to listen to is one of his arias from The Barber of Seville. Now, The Barber of Seville mixed both comedic and serious storytelling, and it tells the story of a count who wants to marry this lady, but she's locked away by an old doctor who wants to marry her for her money. And the town barber, who's kind of a matchmaker, fixer-upper, he helps the count woo her and get her out. Anyways, the aria is a great example of Rossini's really florid bel canto style of of writing, with really dramatic variations within the aria. There's cantabile sections, which are very lyrical and flowy, and then there's the cabaletta sections, which are lively and let's go, hiya! So I would encourage you to listen to this aria that I have for you. by Rossini. And I think you will enjoy hearing the different styles that are in there. The aria, by the way, is called Una voce poco fa. So the other two major opera composers living at this time were from Italy, were Vincenzo Bellini, who only lived to be 34 years old. He's the young-looking guy on the left, and then Gaetano Donizetti. Now Bellini, he was known for some incredible melodies, such as his Casa Diva from Norma, and Casa Diva means chaste goddess. The basic structure of this song starts off just going down in steps, da da da, but then there's all this florid, fancy writing in between, getting to those different steps. So if you'd like, this is optional listening, but you can listen to Casta Diva on your playlist by Bellini. One version is with a very well-known contemporary opera singer, Renee Fleming. The other is by Maria Callas, who we've heard before. She was a very famous 20th century opera singer. And it's interesting to hear the difference between their interpretations and their tone. So that's optional listening. You can take a listen to Casta Diva by Bellini if you'd like. The other Italian opera composer we need to talk about, Gaetano Donizetti. He wrote, besides opera, oratorios, which remember are religious opera-like music collections, but without the acting and staging. Cantatas, which remember are some collections of religious songs. Church music, symphonies, and other songs. He wrote 70 operas in his lifetime. And one of his operas, La Fille du Régiment, has perhaps the most difficult tenor aria ever written. And this is not countertenor or castrati. This is an actual true tenor, like what we have in choir. And it's affectionately called the high C aria, and not because it has some nautical theme to it, but because the aria requires a tenor to repeatedly sing on a high C, and that's one octave above middle C, repeatedly. So take a listen on your playlist to my favorite operatic tenor, Juan Diego Flores, singing this particular aria. Or if you want some contrast, give the film quality a break because it's old, but the music is still beautiful. One of the most famous tenors of all time, Pavarotti, singing Ah mes amis. So take a listen to that aria, at least by Juan Diego. I'd encourage you to listen to the Pavarotti version as well, and then come back and join us. Now, just some other quick notes that we need to make from this era. You've got, during this time, French grand opera, and all that means is the French style of opera is using a lot of mechanical devices and machines. There's ballet included, there's elaborate sets, there's huge casts and orchestras, and there's an image of the Paris Opera House there on the left, kind of demonstrating what this would look like with the 3D set instead of the flat backdrop. William Tell was an example of this French grand opera. Russia is also starting to develop its own opera world, with Mikhail Glinka becoming the first Russian composer of opera to have his work performed and acclaimed outside of Russia itself. So they're developing their own musical system, their own musical history, which we will see is going to be accelerating here in the Romantic era. We have German opera being developed beyond Mozart's groundbreaking work, and you've got Karl von Weber breaking new ground with his operas, because he's now also including more simple characters, people, not royalty and nobility or crazy mythical people, but just ordinary everyday people in his operas. Opera also starts arriving in the US. It's not hugely popular, but it does attract the well-to-do crowd, and overtures and arias from these different operas now are published as individual pieces that people can perform as part of smaller concerts. So opera's starting to make a little headway here. There was a couple attempts to write opera in English, but didn't really happen. Didn't work. What's really popular in the US at this time are what are called minstrel shows. And what these are where white performers would dress up in blackface and impersonate African American jokes, skits, songs, and dances. And keep in mind, this is the first half of the 19th century, so this is leading up to the Civil War. While this obviously comes across as offensive, as it should, at this time it was viewed not unlike how we might view a drag show today. Still inappropriate, but it was an avenue for people to comment on social and political issues in ways that they couldn't comment in just a regular venue or forum. So, but that's what's popular in the United States at this point. So, there's our short presentation for today, and I'll see you tomorrow.